said I needed you. You said you would always stay.
You know right away who it is, you know. There are a couple of voices like that, and that's Dusty's one.
Dusty, the finest woman singer that ever came from Britain.
And I'm left here on my own.
She could sing the phone book and make it sound like a heart-rending, touching, lovelorn ballad.
To come home, you don't have to say you love me, just be close and there. You don't have to stay forever, I will understand.
It's not enough to say she was our greatest female singer. I think she was our greatest pop singer of all time. They don't make them like that anymore. They really don't. Just great. You recognise her wherever you are.
She just cemented herself into the psyche of the British public.
Dusty, in reality, was Mary Isabel Catherine Bernadette O'Brien, who was a little red-haired, chubby-faced kid at school.
I don't remember a lot about my childhood, but I do remember that I had this peculiar voice even when I was very tiny. We used to make little 78 demo records. And I was watching Judy Garland doing some of the numbers that I used to copy slavishly on record when I was little, songs out of Easter Parade. I love the piano, I love the piano. My parents had a pretty eclectic taste in music, and that rubbed off on my brother and I. When that midnight choo-choo leaves for Alabama, I'll be right there, I've got my fare. I was fortunate to have an older brother, and when he played clubs, I sort of crept out of school and worked with him. That's where you stop your train, that brings me back again.
I think she always felt that Tom was much cleverer than her. He was the big brother, and I think she always felt a little bit, not jealous of Tom, but a little bit beneath Tom.
Doctor yelled all aboard for Alabama.
When she was with the Lana Sisters, I mean, that was an extraordinary setup, the Lana Sisters. I mean, it was Dusty's, if you like, stepping stone in the business, of course, with the Lanas.
It was a little bit Alma Cogan, they all were in those days, because everybody wanted to be as successful as Alma Cogan at that time. And so that was the beginning of the image, beginning of her stage persona, and she built on it as time went by.
Well, there were influences, but we were pseudo everything, and we knew it. I mean, we just jumped up and down a lot and were cheerful, which was, there was a niche somewhere for cheerful people. And we were terribly out of tune. We just sang very fast and very cheerfully. And they gave us a TV series, would you believe? You know, we didn't have a record or anything, but that was the BBC for you. Hello, everybody. We'd just like to say how very happy we are to be with you on our own program. Well, the first song was a Zulu War tune with Tom on the bongo drum, Tim on guitar, and I'm Dusty. We were sort of like a scaled-down version of the New Christy Minstrel, determinedly cheerful. Mike Hurst was the replacement for Tim Field. That happened about halfway through. In fact, the hits were made with Mike rather than with Tim.
I was asked to turn up for an audition at Quaglino's in St James's in, I think it would have been September, October 1961. And I got a letter from Tom Springfield 2 weeks later saying, we'd like you to join the Springfields. That was it.
Don't stand there waiting, got no place to go. Come on home. You looked at me like that, and I can't say no. Come on home. Well, I know you done me wrong, and I know I should be strong.
Tom Springfield took the name because what he liked was the fact that in practically every state of the Union, there's a Springfield. It's the most common name, and since we were doing folky, country, that sort of material, Springfield seemed like a good name, actually, because it was so American. It's Americana, strangely enough, from 3 people who came from London around the Maida Vale area, all of us, actually. Tom wrote the songs, Dusty was the lead vocalist, but between them, in terms of show business, I never thought there was any great closeness because Dusty was the one who wanted to be show business. Tom was the one who really would have been so happy if he never had to go near a TV studio or a theatre.
In the Springfields, she added to the image, and the wigs appeared, and it became a little bit more Hollywood, a little bit kind of Peggy Lee, come June Havers, which was the star that she actually based her look on at that time.
The hair was unbelievable. I mean, this is a funny thing to say, but she barely washed it because she couldn't run the risk. This is before the wigs all started to happen. But with the hair, when it was in the bouffant style, she wouldn't wash that. What she'd do is back comb it again every morning and respray. And the respray of the hair lacquer, you remember there were 2 of us, Tom and I had to sing on either side of her. So we're stuffed in on one microphone like this and my nose is firmly into the hair. And I gotta tell you, the hair lacquer was unbelievable. Apart from the fact it could have bounced off her head, the smell was also pretty, you know what I'm saying, it sounds awful, but true.
If you listen to the solo that she did in Silver Threads and Golden Needles, it comes through that you're listening to somebody quite special, quite different from the kind of folk entity that the Springfields had.
And I dare not drown my sorrow in the warm glow of your wine.
In February 1962, we had Silver Threads and Golden Needles, which was the first ever hit by a British vocal group in the American top 10. The real and true reason the Springfields broke up, everybody assumed then, assumes now. It's because Dusty, they say, got up and said, I want to go solo, that's it. Didn't happen like that at all. I'm not saying it might not have been planned that way, but it didn't happen that way.
We had individual talents. I had never intended to stay with the group, and they knew that.
Tom looked at the 2 of us and said, seriously, this is true, said, why don't we break up? Now, that sort of hit me for a second. Dusty just said, yeah, do you really want to do that? He said, yeah, it's a good idea. Now me, again, what am I now, 20? I just looked at him and said, yeah, great idea. It meant nothing to me. It just seemed, yeah, why not, you know? And that was it.
So every day I have to cry some. Every day I have to cry some. Dry the water from my eyes some. Every day I have to cry.
I had 3 weeks off between the end of the Springfields and the beginning of me. And I got to be the MC, or commaire, they used to say. And it was quite nerve-wracking, actually, because I can't see cue cards, so I had to remember everything, which is very dodgy.
We did a pilot to see if Rediffusion liked it. And one of the groups that did the pilot was the Springfields. And the deal was that if we got picked up into a show, then the groups that did the pilot would be on the show. And the show was picked up. And so we thought the Springfields were on, but Dusty showed up in the office and said, no, we're not going to do it because we're no longer together, we've split up.
It was an irreverent show. It's the first show where you didn't have the control of an audience out front. Artists kept well away from them. Everything was intermingled. You saw the cameras, you saw people bumping into things, and it was groundbreaking television entertainment. There's never been another show like it.
It was just chaos. I mean, I had such a love-hate relationship with that program because I think I actually did more of them than anyone else.
Dusty suited that kind of anarchy. And of course, when she was given the job of comparing a show on there, of course she went into a goonish kind of humour, and she did it quite well.
New Year's Eve shows were great, and riotous and drunken events. I mean, all the artists, all the crew, everybody was drunk. I can't believe they actually put them out.
They used to announce people and they weren't there. I don't know, they passed out or something. I'm sure Sandy Shaw didn't pass out, but she wasn't there, so I had to do always something there to remind me with no shoes on. I know that, because there was no one to fill in. Somebody had to do it. I just happened to be standing there at the time. I also filled in for Gene Pitney once. That was interesting.
I don't know what it is that makes me love you so. I only know I never wanna let you go. 'Cause you started something, can't you see? That ever since we met you had a hold on me. It happens to be true. I only wanna be with you, yeah. Going to a movie only makes me sad. Parties make me feel as bad when I'm not with you. I just don't know what to do. How many tears do you cry if love should break your heart in two? How many tears will I cry now that I know I'm losing you? I can't stop wanting you, and no matter what you do, you're still a part of me, even though I'm losing you. Stay a while, let me hold you. Stay a while till I told you all the love that I feel tonight. Oh, yeah.
Dusty was a glorious fake. I mean, the Dusty Springfield that gradually became created through her changing style to become the Just Dusty that was on Ready, Steady, Go, and the Just Dusty that was singing You Don't Have to Say You Love Me. That was Dusty solo. That was her finished image, as it were.
It was the mascara look that you pioneered, wasn't it?
Yeah, I mean, obviously that came from being so short-sighted. I mean, you know how it is. Are you short-sighted or
Well, no, I see. These old eyes don't miss much.
No, but actually, if you have to take your glasses off to put your eyes on, then you can't really see what you're doing, so you put too much on, and that's how it came
Simple
about.
as that?
It is very simple.
Did you ever try contact lenses, Dusty?
Yeah, but I've always got cat hair in my eyes, so it doesn't really work. It hurts too much.
You shouldn't let those cats sit on your face, Dusty.
It's a hobby.
She spent ages peering in the mirror. And, is that right? Yeah, okay, that's probably the best you can do, she'd say. You know, oh dear, I need a bit more polyfiller was her favourite feeling.
She wouldn't have another makeup artist, so it would start off and it would go wrong because she couldn't see properly, you know, and then she'd have to start again. And those kind of stories of her, you know, taking hours and hours also stemmed partially, not entirely, but partially from her inability to see more than 2 foot in front of her nose.
It did take her 5 hours because a lot of, as you know, a lot of the shows, TV shows particularly, have, well, early starts by her standard, meaning sort of lunchtime-ish. So she really would get up at 5 a.m.
All Dusty asked for was a big mirror so she could see and 100-watt bulbs.
I'm constantly peering in mirrors, and people say, my God, isn't she conceited? And I'm actually not seeing anything.
I've known her to come out of a beautiful, comfortable, star-like dressing room and go into what was the dancers' dressing room, which is basically nothing there except the bright lights and a big mirror, and use that so that she could see to put her makeup on and we could see properly to make sure she looked all right.
You must have got through a lot of hair lacquer in those days.
I still do.
You probably had your own hole in the ozone layer.
Dusty had 3 wigs, which was Cilla, Lulu and Sandy.
She said, you want to give Cilla a good kicking for me? And I thought, what has Cilla Black done to upset her? And of course it transpired to be the 3 wigs that she had, and Cilla apparently was misbehaving that day. And she knew that I played football, and it was a kind of an in-joke between us, you know, we'd go back and play a bit of football with Cilla, and we did actually give the wig a bit of a kicking in the dressing room, just for the hell of it.
If you're sort of 17 years old and you're called Mary Isabel Catherine Bernadette O'Brien, and you don't like who you are, you're going to find a mask or a front. And it worked very successfully. It was very hard maintaining it, but it was highly effective in its way.
When she started in the business, it was just before Bieber and Barbara Halanikian, that whole situation, you know, the whole scene was happening. And here's Dusty in beaded gowns and real frocks, and then next comes Cilla in Bieber. You know, it was quite a contrast and very different, and actually amazing that the public stuck with Dusty, you know, through the 60s and through the trendy swinging London.
Calling out around the world, are you ready for a brand new beat? Yeah, a summer's here and the time is right for dancing in the street. They're dancing in Chicago.
Dusty was a very early supporter of the Motown sound and the groups, the Shirelles, the Temptations, the Four Tops. Her big love was Martha and the Vandellas.
Music, there'll be music everywhere. There'll be swinging, swaying, and records playing, dancing in the street.
There was a shop in London called Soul City, which Dave Godin ran, and they brought in American imports. And so Dusty and I practically every Saturday would go down there and just buy, you know, a pile of records.
It doesn't matter what you wear, just as long as you are there. So come on, every guy, grab your girl, everywhere. Around the world they'll be dancing, yeah.
The most significant tour for us with Dusty would be the time we went to New York in September '64, the Murray the K holiday show. It was at the Fox Theatre in Brooklyn. We all stayed in Manhattan at the Americana, I think it was. And the UK contingent was ourselves, Dusty and Millie, who had My Boy Lollipop. She was very big in the States. Dusty had had Wishing and Hoping by that time. And the rest of the tour, which must have been heaven for Dusty, and us in fact, because they were our idols, was Marvin Gaye, Smokey and the Miracles, the Supremes, Martha and the Vandellas, the Temptations, the Contours, Little Anthony and the Imperials, the Shangri-Las, Jay and the Americans, the Dovells, the New Beats. Amazing. And of course that's when Dusty made friends with Martha and all those other people. Had a great time. She enjoyed the whole week, had an absolute ball.
Dusty was on stage more than she was off because she was singing background for Marvin or with the Vandellas, and just loved it.
We were doing 6 shows a day for 1 week. Started at 10 o'clock in the morning, finished at 10 o'clock at night. You get all the young white kids in throughout the day. As the evening went on, the audience changed to mainly a black audience, and Marvin and all those people. Well, Marvin was definitely the star at 10 o'clock at night. Dusty for me was a star all through the whole thing at any time.
I was aware of Motown because I'd spent some time in the States, and so I was really excited. And when suddenly you have Dusty sort of being a champion for Motown on Ready, Steady, Go, singing Little by Little and all these kind of things, and it kind of sort of thought, oh, at least someone understands what music can be about, this kind of music can be about, and she understood it.
When the Motown Review went out on the road and was coming here, Dusty said again to Elkin and I, why don't we do a special Ready Steady Go with all Motown? And Elkin said, why don't we do a Sound of Motown and put it as a separate program?
You are watching the Sound of Motown by Dusty Springfield.
Motown, that stands for Motor Town, which is Detroit, and it's famous for its cars, and for a collection of buildings called Pittsville. Here with their newest one, Ooh, Baby, Baby, it is the Miracle!
She made it possible for Motown to come here and be on Ready, Steady, Go and be on Top of the Pops and have success here. So that's really a historical moment that changed, I think, music forever.
But in the game I lost you.
Ready Steady really did introduce, or Dusty, through me, introduced black music into England. I don't honestly think it would have had the impact had we not had that outlet for it. It was the Temptations, Miracles, Little, Stevie Wonder, who truly was 13 at the time, Martha and the Vandellas, the Supremes, and Earl Van Dyke. And it was just the best show because, of course, we all knew that the music most of it was hits by that stage in England, but we'd never seen the artists.
She was certainly an opponent of apartheid in South Africa, and when the opportunity came up for her to go out there, she did so quite clearly on the stipulation that she would only play to unsegregated audiences.
Why did you have this special anti-apartheid clause written into your contract? Do you feel strongly politically about this?
No, I don't know the first thing about politics. All I know is that I think that there shouldn't be anybody, if they want to buy a ticket, should be allowed to do so. And this was the agreement I went under. And sorry.
Why was your contract different to previous ones? It was much stronger.
Well, I think that I may be wrong about this, but I think that in the case of most British artists who've been there before, they have played maybe 1 or 2 segregated concerts. And I didn't particularly want to do that.
You were determined not to play any segregated concerts?
Yes, I think that possibly aggravated the people in charge.
She came back on the plane. They tried to stop her band leaving with her. She refused to leave the airport until all the band had seats on the plane as well. They blocked off the first class for her. And when they got off the plane at the other end, the entire plane gave her a round of applause.
She was an immense talent. She had an astonishing voice, and it doesn't die. It's an absolutely endurable voice of immense quality.
It's just a heartbreak I know will come, and I know they're no good for me.
I remember a headline, it's actually in an old scrapbook of mine, saying the white negress, they called her, the white negress. Now, she did what Aretha did, and still does. She didn't do vocal gymnastics all over the place all the time. She sang the melody of a song, but she used that black soul and that black feel to a good effect. And that's what I think was great about Dusty.
Dusty sounded black, actually. So it was like, wow, you know, this is great. If she can do it, then I can do it.
Hear my plea. Come on back to me. Don't want to.
A great voice and a unique voice. There is only that voice. You'll never hear it again. In the same way as Aretha Franklin is Aretha Franklin, you'll never hear another Aretha Franklin. There are many other great singers, but nobody else sounds like them.
I think Dusty was a sort of musical magpie. I think she picked up from all kinds of things. I mean, people talked about her as a soul singer. And she said, I can never be a soul singer because I'm not black, you know, or words to that effect. Well, that's a kind of nonsense thing to say because soul is really just singing from the heart.
For me, Dusty's voice has a kind of a frailty yet a strength. It's that sort of double-edged sort of quality. It's the same quality that one has, that you have when you hear a great jazz singer, I think. it's kind of a bit of Peggy Lee in there, a bit of country in there, and also a bit of sort of classic jazz singer, a bit of Billie Holiday at the right moment.
If you go away on this summer day, then you might as well take the sun away.
It's one of the very few voices that I still sort of stop and listen.
When our love was new and our hearts were high.
She manages to convey those feelings often of sadness and loss so perfectly. And it's hard not to love her because of that.
If you go away, if you go away, if you go away.
She could sing the phone book and make it sound like a heart-rending, touching, lovelorn ballad. You know, she could sing Brel, she could sing Charles Aznavour, she could sing 60s pop, she could sing these gigantic songs, or she could sing small, Ne me quitte pas.
I think there were a number of different combinations that worked very well with her. I think the combination that probably worked best were Carole King and Burt Bacharach songs. Carole King used to say that she sang Carole King, Jerry Goffin songs better than any other artist that had ever covered their work.
I met Carole King in the Brill Building in New York when she was probably about 18. I just remember she was this little thing with lots of hair. And I thought, my God, all that music comes out of you. And she and her husband at that time, Jerry Goffin, they just wrote priceless songs. And the fact is that she made such good demos, I used to collect them. Because you couldn't better the demo. You absolutely could not better the demo.
Burt Bacharach used to say that her work on songs like Wishing and Hoping and Anyone Who Had a Heart, which she covered at one point, were better than anybody else had done it.
I flew over to New York to have dinner with Burt Bacharach from the Liverpool Empire, where I was playing, and had dinner with him, and I just don't know what to do with myself out of that.
I made a record of a song 2 years ago in America. I thought it was a pretty great record, till I got a record in the mail from London of the same song by Dusty Springfield, which I thought was so much better than the record that I had made. I'd like her to come out now and sing it. I just don't know what to do with myself.
I just don't know what to do with myself. Don't know just what to do with myself. I'm so used to doing everything with you, planning everything for two, and now that we're through, I just don't know what to do with my time. I'm so lonesome for you, it's a crime. Going to a movie only makes me sad. Parties make me feel as bad when I'm not with you.
Burt absolutely adored Dusty. He thought that her interpretation of his songs was, you know, just the best, and he was very sweet, and also he was very patient with her, because again, you know, Dusty would sing things one time and then say, I don't like it, I want to do it again, and he was very good with her, and he would say, no, that's it, you've got it, you know, we've hit it on the head, you'll lose it if you keep going.
It's just a great voice. This is a voice that, like, is, you know right away who it is, you know. There are a couple of voices like that, and that's Dusty's one.
So
I think that she was very, very judgmental of herself, and not necessarily right in doing that. But you know, a person is what they are.
It's saying so much more than just words could ever say. And what my heart has heard, well, it takes my breath away. I can hardly hold you, feel my arms around you. How long I have waited just to love you. Now that I have found you, don't ever go. Don't ever go. I love you so.
His songs were extremely complex, which of course attracted her to them because it was a challenge for her.
A chair is still a chair, even though there's no one sitting there. But a chair is not a house, and a house is not a home when there's no one there to hold you tight, and no one there you can kiss goodnight.
Dusty had been at the San Remo Song Festival. She'd performed there, and she came back with a song in Italian, which every time she was going to record, she'd pull out this song, play it, and say, I'm going to write lyrics, I'm going to record it. I said, look, any fool can write lyrics. I was having dinner with Simon Napier Bell. I said, you better come and have a listen to this song Dusty's got and see what you think. We need to write lyrics.
When I said I needed you said you would always stay.
We listened to it and he said, it's a great song, you know, great melody. And, you know. So we started arguing about, because you know, didn't want to have to say, I love you, and he said, okay, let's do it in reverse. You don't have to say you love me.
Don't you see that now you've gone, and I'm left here on my own.
The next day I'm typing them up, and I called Simon. I said, they are such rubbish. I am embarrassed. I cannot send this to Dusty. So he said, well, what are you going to do? So I said, send them to Dusty. Sent them over, and she said, God, they're bad. They really are rubbish. But I've got to do it today, so I'll do it. And of course, the song went to #1, and I'm just going, oh dear, you know, we could have done so much better.
Left alone with just a memory. Life seems dead and so unreal. All that's left is loneliness. There's nothing left to give. You don't have to say you love me just
Dusty did a couple of series with the BBC. Stanley Dorfman directed them, and she was allowed to do anything she wanted, which again is unheard of now. Her musical tastes were very eclectic, very wide, so that she would do an Irish folk song alongside something Carmen Miranda would have done, alongside something Latin, alongside one of her hits. It was a wonderful way for her to show the breadth of what she liked and what she could sing.
I really enjoy the fact that all these people have come into a studio with their cameras and whatever just to do a program on me.
She wasn't sure of the format, the correct format for a TV show. It's completely different to a stage show, you see. Plus the fact you get feedback from the stage. And in a studio, it's a completely different feeling altogether.
She was slightly less comfortable because it was much more a formal setting, so there was silence while she was speaking.
When she was on stage, being short-sighted, Dusty could look out and play to that audience because she couldn't see anybody. But if she was in the studio, she could see people, and sometimes, because it was closer, she could recognise people, and that would throw her a bit. Because she was, I mean, basically Dusty was terribly shy.
I'd like to do a song now which is a complete change of tempo. There's a thing recorded by one of my own favourite singers, Jack Jones, who's very underrated, I think. It's called To Love and Be Loved. It's a funny thing with my name. When I see it written or hear it spoken, it's, I feel disassociated. It's almost another person.
When she heard the name Dusty Springfield announced, she would say, I can't believe it's me when I go on stage. I think they're announcing somebody else, you know, because it's not really me. But what was really her, which she never really fully realised, I don't think, was the voice. The voice was real.
I didn't know Mary. She was Dusty when I met her. You know, I think Mary had been buried a long time before that. You know, she talked to me of Mary. I mean, Mary was a very Catholic, straight girl. You know, so I've got photographs of her. No one recognises the photographs of her before she became Dusty. So Dusty was someone she invented, really.
I'd invented a person at the age of 17 to become, and had lived and become just Dusty Springfield, and it became a monster to me. I totally lost touch with whoever was underneath it.
Dusty was two people, really. She was a normal girl next door when she was off stage, and although she loved performing once she got out there, getting on there was a nightmare for her.
The Dusty Springfield I knew was a combination of various sorts of people. I mean, if one was intimate with her on a one-on-one, it was a very playful, fun, vulnerable person to be around. The Dusty that was more public Dusty, she had a very definite idea of what the public Dusty should be, so it was a construction in terms of the clothes, the makeup, the hair, the wig, you know. It was something that she put on to sort of face the public.
She was potty, she was zany, she was vulnerable, she was incredibly talented, she was difficult.
I don't think it's possible to sum Dusty up because she was complex.
Practical joker, she was a diva, she was incredibly generous, she was very kind-hearted.
Dusty, I knew, was a silly person who played games. We had seances with Dionne Warwick. We did stupid things. We always tried to find breakfast all day because we both love bacon and eggs.
She'd ring me up some Sunday mornings. What have you got for lunch? Having a roast. Have you got roast parsnips? Yes. What time are you eating? About 4. Can I come? She'd come at 5. Luckily I knew this, I got to know this and would do dinner for 5. But she was that that ordinary.
Then you had the other side, which was the Dusty Springfield that was, you know, the star. Although in the early days, of course, she wasn't. Dusty Springfield was just beginning and it was no big deal. But as it went on, it got a bigger deal to her.
She felt, I think, that schism, that schizophrenia, more poignantly than perhaps most other artists do. She felt it was in some way that she was cheating, I think. And she wasn't. She was doing exactly what every other artist has ever done since time immemorial, which is to invent a persona for herself which will help sell the talent that she had, which was her singing voice.
The way you make me feel the moment I am close to you makes today seem so unreal. Somehow I can't believe it's true. Tomorrow will you still be here? Tomorrow will come, but I fear that what is happening to me is only a dream. I close my eyes and count to 10, and when I open them, you're still here. I close my eyes and count again. I can't believe it, but you're still here. I close my eyes and count again. I can't believe it, but you're still here. Baby, baby, baby. I can't believe it, but you're still here.
Dusty was a strange woman in a way because you don't think of a woman as being a goon. By a goon, I don't mean an idiot. I mean the Goon Show from the 1950s, Peter Sellers, Spike Milligan. She and Tom used to call me Neddy, after Neddy Seagoon, because I loved it all so much. And her sense of humor, therefore, was so goon-like and so bizarre.
Tom might have renamed himself as Dionysius Plonk, Dionysius or whatever, but Dusty was Gladys Thong for a while.
They were terrible practical jokers, those two, absolutely awful to each other. One night she moved all his whole flat out, all his belongings out of his flat, and put them in this big van and stored them, so when he came back he thought he'd been burgled.
She got very fond of throwing food, which was not one of her best habits.
If you ever played in a hotel, you know, you'd be halfway through doing What Have They Done to the Rain, and the plates would fall. I mean, she'd be outside throwing crockery on the stairs, but didn't matter. We'd be in hysterics on the stage. She'd be in hysterics backstage.
Great sense of humour, very, very dark. She could see the funny side in most things. And actually it was kind of her saving grace, because however upset and worried and perfectionist she got about things, after it was sort of all over and either it had been cleared or it hadn't been cleared or whatever, she could then laugh about it, you know? And that would kind of save the day.
Dusty did have tantrums. I think we all know she did. It's well documented. But she could always see the ridiculousness of it afterwards. There was a wonderful one when we were rehearsing for some live show. We were round a piano with the musical director and the three backing singers going over and over the parts, and something was going wrong. And she lost her temper with the MD and stormed out and told him to get out and slammed the door, and then came very timidly back through the door, having remembered that we were actually in his house.
So we're in my office, talking about everything. She had her shoes off, and like me, she was as blind as a bat. So glasses on, shoes off, which meant she was about that high. And for some reason, I can't remember what it was, but she was very unhappy about something. I had made her unhappy, but one of the photographs she didn't like, burst into tears, ran out of my office door, realised that she was in this big corridor at EMI, everybody looking at this sort of middle-aged lady. No, she couldn't see anything, no shoes on feet. Turned around, looked round, horrified, ran straight back into office. I said, Triff, you've got to sort this out. She was that sort of person.
Every time I see you looking my way, baby, can't you hear my heartbeat in the park or walking down the highway, baby,
working with Dusty was a little bit crazy. She was a terrible timekeeper, and she couldn't help it. It wasn't deliberate. She just, I think she would get panicky before she had to do anything. And then instead of getting ready in a certain time, she'd take twice as long because she wasn't thinking straight. But when she worked, she was a perfectionist, an out-and-out perfectionist.
She wouldn't call you once to say, don't forget to bring the makeup mirror. She would call you 6 times. And I'm reasonably efficient. So after the second time, I really had got it. So it was hard. And also because a lot of her instincts, when you said, there's this offer and this is why it's good and da-da-da-da, nope, don't want to do it. Okay. And then you knew the phone was going to ring within the next 30 minutes and then it would be, yes, okay, we'll do it.
I call her Madam because I suppose to me she was an early kind of diva, but not a stroppy diva. She wasn't one who would, never in front of me would throw tantrums and kick Teddy out the cot. She just looked like this glamorous, untouchable person, although she wasn't, and you could speak to her, and she was kind of great fun. She still had that awe about her. There was something very charismatic about Dusty.
I'd be forever having to reschedule something because we'd overrun something or something had gone wrong, and it was almost a 24/7 job.
I would say that all the people who worked for Dusty Springfield that I knew, the publicist, the manager, the TV editor, the agent, her PA, they all loved her. They were all utterly devoted to her. You could not possibly have worked for Dusty Springfield if you weren't absolutely devoted to her, because she was impossible.
She was quite likely to ring me up at 2 o'clock in the morning, forgetting what time it was, and go, Pat, I promised so-and-so, his name is such and such, I've promised him a photograph. Remind me because I've got his piece of paper somewhere with his address on it.
I think the word difficult is one of those magic words which just means that you give 150%. And in those days, it was actually quite hard to find anyone to give 100 around you. So I think it was either Liza Minnelli or somebody like that who said, or Barbra Streisand actually, just sort of said that being difficult is just wanting to do the best you can.
Girl singers did not have any creative control over their records in those days. They turned up in their lovely feathery frocks like Alma Cogan and just sang the song. But Dusty was the first one who had a creative input in the musical creation of the records.
If you see her working with people like Mel Torme, it's a revelation. Mel Torme, who supreme jazz vocalist, white jazz vocalist, the best ever, technically, playing piano for Dusty Springfield to sing. I mean, that's quite something, He wouldn't do that for just anybody.
He's gonna turn me down and say, can't we be friends? I thought I knew the wheat from the chaff. What a laugh, this is how the story ends. He's gonna turn me down and say, can't we be friends?
She really knew music, and she really knew what her voice could do with the music.
True with love, true with men.
If 4 or 5 violins were playing and one of them was out of tune, she could tell you.
She was a great technician of singing, I think. She knew how to do it. She didn't just sing, she actually thought about it. Apparently she drove people crazy. I know she drove Jerry Wexler mad doing Dusty in Memphis.
In the studio she was a nightmare because yes, she would record word by word or line by line, and then she'd redo it, do it again.
When she was trying to get particular sounds that she had heard on the Motown records, for instance, she would have learned from the Motown musicians that they plugged the bass directly into the recording desk and it wasn't mic'd as was the normal thing to do. And she would try in her own way to get the musicians to play in the same way as the Motown guys. But because she wasn't a trained musician, she would kind of come up against a brick wall there.
But I never got my name on the label as a producer because this is rather typical of what one can be conditioned into thinking as a woman. I thought that I shouldn't take the credit, that it would take away from my credibility as an innocent little singer.
There would have been some resentment at that time, but she got what she set out for. If you listen to her records and listen to those of her contemporaries, the production is much better on Dusty's records, so she knew what she was doing.
You've been crying, your face is
Perhaps the biggest success story of her American trip was the Dusty in Memphis album, which was regarded now as a classic, but it wasn't actually quite such a classic success at the time it was done.
Going to Memphis to do a soul record, you know, that's unusual.
What it did do was to put her with some musicians who for the first time thrust her voice out, right out in front.
the talk is loud and the walls are much too thin.
In the first place, Dusty Springfield and the Chips Moman's American Rhythm section, according to most observers, would be the most improbable quinella in musical history.
That's what I heard them say.
There's no consonance there. How can you put Dusty Springfield in with this band of redneck bragamuffins with their Southern style?
Jerry Wexler loved and depended on these fantastic R&B soul musicians, the rhythm section. These people played behind Wilson Pickett, Elvis Presley, so he thought, and he was right, that we cannot go wrong. And we also recorded many other of our artists with the same people. So, but when we took Dusty down there, the story changed because she was used to record with a bigger orchestra. She would have this cushion of sound behind her so that she can emote and sing loud, high notes and things like that. This wasn't like that. It was a very stripped down situation.
This, I know, was a source of great discomfort to her until she just sat and listened and finally had the genius to accommodate to it.
I think there were a couple times that, you know, Dusty was going to, you know, pack her bags and go home.
Billy Ray was a preacher's son, and when his daddy would visit, he'd come along.
In retrospect, it's a classic album and a beautiful piece of vocal work. Son of a Preacher Man came off that as a huge hit, of course.
When they were putting it out as a single, and she played it down the phone to me like 3 times, and was thrilled to bits with it.
When they gathered around and started talking, Dusty and Billy would take me walking. Out through the backyard we go walking. Then they look into my eyes. Lord knows to my surprise, the only one who could ever reach me was the son of a preacher man.
Jerry wanted Aretha to do it right at the beginning, and Aretha turned it down. Dusty recorded it, and then later Aretha did it.
She did it the way that I wish I'd done it. That often happens when you hear somebody do it afterwards. She'll phrase it, the only one who could ever reach me. Where I went, the only one who could ever reach. Damn, when I didn't do that.
And when his daddy would visit, he'd come along. When they gathered
Vincent. Since Pulp Fiction, when Tarantino put Son of a Preacher Man on the soundtrack, there's been a whole new audience who didn't really know her before. It's ironic, really, that the only platinum disc Dusty ever received was for the soundtrack of Pulp Fiction.
The only boy who could ever teach me was the son of a preacher man. Yes, he was. He was. Oh, yes, he was. The only one who could ever reach. He was a sweet. How can I be sure? I really want to know.
We met at Philips in a little office, and she was doing a lot of interviews to promote a new record, which was How Can I Be Sure? I didn't want to talk about music all the time, so we got talking about vices, and I said, well, what are your vices, Dusty? She said she went through that she burped, yeah, that she didn't cut a toenail, she ripped them off. And then she said, and I'm also very promiscuous. There have been stories for years about her being gay, which, you know, I didn't know and didn't really care about, and you know, but she wanted to tell me. I mean, she forced me to ask her the question, well, are you gay? And she said, well, I can be swayed as much by a boy as by a girl.
she couldn't admit to the way she felt about things then. And I think, as Smokey Robinson did say in his song, Behind a Painted Smile, I think what went on in her life and in her mind must have been an awful lot of confusion.
She'd made a decision that she was going to tell me. And she was, basically she said that she was bisexual and that she liked girls as much as boys. And it was a sort of strange thing because she was giggling all the time, telling me, thinking, she must have thought this is going to hurt her career.
People just assume that you go out with boys if you're a girl, don't they? And I think that she was probably under that kind of pressure, like, who is she dating? Well, you know, who cares? And it's nobody's business, really.
She was a staunch Catholic too. And those two things, staunch Catholicism and her sexual orientation, were very difficult for her. Very difficult, especially as every man in sight that we met was trying to come on to Dusty. And Dusty, of course, just had no inclination whatsoever.
Dusty was bisexual. And there's no ifs or buts, because I knew people, male and female, that were friends, very close friends with Dusty. And unfortunately, you find the men probably wouldn't like to admit it because it's beneath them if they've been with somebody that sleeps with women. And the women don't want to hear anything about the fact that she was anything other than lesbian.
I can't seem to find somebody who's there.
She had to be careful how she trod that particular path. But when it actually came to it, she was there and ready to be counted as well.
As she finished the interview, as we left Philly, because I took her home that day, and we went home together, and she was saying, this could be the kiss of death to my career. I'm doomed now forever, probably.
Somebody shouted out, is it true you're a lesbian, you know, in the audience? And things like that were the things that really, she was very paranoid about her sexuality, you know.
It was part of her reason from going from England to America to hide for a bit, because the press was getting a little bit too invasive about her personal life, and she ran from it. And she ran right into trouble with drugs and drink in America, unfortunately. She should have stayed here. She should have stayed here, based herself here, and probably gone into Europe, who were a bit more understanding about people's private lives.
How can I be sure? I'm sure with you.
England in the late 60s, 70s, beginning 70s, was very limited. I mean, as an artist, Lulu Silla, Dusty, especially a girl artist, you played like the London Palladium, you would play some nice venues, but then you really ended up in the working men's clubs. There was no, or in pantomime, you know, there was no future in England. You had to go somewhere else.
In the cool of the evening when everything is getting kind of groovy.
When it was suggested that she went to America, she loved it and she wanted to make it big in America. She jumped at it. It was just for her, just that little bit too early.
She signed with new management, went to America. They did not get it.
They wanted to stick her into a category. There wasn't a category to stick her into. She wasn't country, she wasn't folk, she wasn't rock and roll, she wasn't jazz. What was she?
Love is kind of crazy with a spooky little boy like you.
They put her in sort of the hotel circuit, just totally wrong, while people eating and drinking. I mean, that drove her absolutely bonkers.
I did get very depressed and very despondent. I mean, if you sit around and things are not going your way and you wonder really what the hell you should be doing, and not feeling comfortable with Los Angeles and feeling sort of awash and adrift, it was a very despondent period in my life and things were not easy at all.
I'm not as crazy as I used to be. Some of my devils up and left me free to find a quiet space.
Sometimes singers they pay too much attention to those around them and they don't follow their instincts. Or maybe the people around them don't give them the right songs to sing. And with a singer, it's always about the song, always.
Now look in the mirror, see a brand new girl. I got a brand new walk, a brand new smile.
She just made some of the worst records in between. She'd always had control over recording here. She spent far too much money on all the wrong things and really ended up totally broke, which was scary. She was really staying on friends' couches and, not a good life.
America was the worst thing that ever happened to her. She always said that, because in the end she came back to England. She was so glad to get back, but she used to ring me up and say, the people, I haven't got any friends really. I know a lot of people, but I haven't got any friends. I feel like I'm an alien here. She just felt completely a fish out of water in America.
They left her without work, which is where the trouble started. She got bored. The wrong people started to attach themselves to her. She was over there on her own.
Instead of being able to deal with it, she started drinking. She started hanging out with a lot of... You just do. I mean, when you get into drugs and drink, you do drugs and drink with people who do drugs and drink, and a lot of them aren't too stable and are a bit batty as well.
I was addicted to all sorts of things in those days, and it was so were so many of us. I mean, it was basically, I'm an addictive personality. I just ate 3 Mars bars, which is not a good idea to come on the Aspel Show and do that. Energy, right? Energy. But I think a lot of us that went through the 60s went through a training period of being ravers. And I think it was encouraged. I mean, the more we sort of fell downstairs and got lunatic behaviour, oh, she's a right card, isn't she?
I never saw her at her actual worst. I don't even know whether Vicky did, but I know she was very, very bad, really, really bad, in and out of homes and things.
I'm starting to believe my own existence has a right to be.
How did you stop them?
It's not a matter of willpower, it's just a matter of really finding that you dislike yourself so much and you're behaving like such a complete creep. Some people never realize that about themselves, and I think it's a blessing. I'd say I didn't have to work at it. I did have a lot of support from people who'd gotten sober, gotten clean, and knew how to stay that way. It's very easy to stop drinking, stop doing drugs. It's not easy to stay stopped.
And now you're on the Mars bars, you see.
Yeah, but I know. Or else it's people. I have problems, I mean, I'm an obsessive person.
I can start to find some reasons, something to believe in.
It was in her mind all the time that, she wasn't going to go back there. She'd beaten it and she was going to stay beating it.
And I can't remember why I went away, but it's looking now like maybe I can stay.
I don't know what she would have done. I'd been very much in touch with her at that time. We were talking a lot on the phone, and we really had conversations about, she said, what else can I do? The only thing she was interested in was maybe I could be a DJ. Perhaps I could be on radio and do that. And, she said, I don't have any talents. There's nothing really I can do. And thank God, they came along. The timing was just brilliant.
Since you went away, I've been hanging around. I've been wondering why I'm feeling down.
I remember when What Have I Done to Deserve This came out, and I was in the kitchen, and suddenly this voice, since you went away, was like, oh my God. It was like we'd been starved of a real beautiful sound, for such a long time. I was straight on the phone to my sister screaming, Dusty Springfield's got a new record out, I can't believe it. And it's good.
I've always blessed the Pet Shop Boys because they brought her back here. When she went to meet them to do the record, she said to them, well, what do you want from me? And they said, we just want your voice.
Dusty's one of those people
You know, she's like Elvis or Bowie. Or Liza. she's a one-word thing. She's Dusty.
I thought her comeback with the Pet Shop Boys was fantastic. I mean, she looked pretty good. She'd again changed her image and softened it a little bit. The hair was a bit curlier. She was a little bit heavier, but she looked good, and she sang beautifully.
Well, when Dusty came in the studio, she said, "How do you want me to sing it?" or something, and Neil said, "I want to sound like you." And so I think she's a bit unsure of her own ability, maybe. I think she's maybe a bit insecure about her vocals and everything, and I don't think she really enjoyed doing them, did she?
They were so patient. They let me go through all these gymnastics, and they weren't saying anything. I suppose they were a bit frightened I might blow up or something, you know.
What was fascinating and slightly frustrating is how long it took to work with her. She got in front of the microphone. She always had a cup of coffee and a cigarette, like this. She started on the first syllable, which was the word Mandy, and she went ma like that. And she said, "OK, start again, start again." And you wind the tape back, intro, sounds great, you know. No, start again, will you? And I looked at the lyrics and I thought, oh, I can't look at it, I thought, I can't believe it. And we want to double track it. I just then became fascinated by how she did it, because actually it's a very intellectual process. She was taking the words and the melody. She said she didn't care what the words meant, by the way. She said she never ever listened to the words. But she'd take the melody and she personally arranged the melody, so each verse and chorus was different. And this song, Nothing Has Been Proved, which is a lovely sounding thing, is actually almost a recitative, really. It's not much of a melody. And at the end, Dusty, it's like someone running up to do the high jump or something. She's thinking about it. And then suddenly, she takes it up. Just like she did on What Madness Deserve This. And she gives it this incredible, it may be false, it may be true thing at the end. This incredible Dusty moment, which really isn't written in the song. And she turns it into her, and it's a thrilling moment.
I have a tendency for overkill, to complicate matters, because I don't think my voice is enough. Therefore, I have to invent this kind of vocal decoration and acrobatics and stuff, and really, you can't do that to a Pet Shop Boys song. They write songs that are meant to be sung rather plainly.
I worked with Dusty first on the Nothing Has Been Proved single, which was part of the Scandal soundtrack. EMI signed Dusty Springfield on the back of that hit single. And I think Neil Tennant and Chris Lowe originally wrote In Private as the B-side, Has Nothing Been Proved. There is a kind of correlation, if you like, with the subject matter of In Private and Scandal, which was about the Profumo affair. And I thought the B-side was much too good to be a B-side, so that became her first single from the album. I think the album had 5 Pet Shop Boys songs on it, and then 5 or 6 songs written by other writers. And she was instrumental in choosing the 5 or 6 other songs. And the Pet Shop Boys songs and Pet Shop Boys productions were all written specifically with her in mind.
Chris also wrote the tune for In Private. He played a little bit. He just played dee 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 dee. I said, it's Dusty. It's a Dusty song, and it's this sort of longing quality.
It opened her up to a generation who didn't know her.
The Pet Shop Boys collaboration was once described, I thought, beautifully as 2 worlds colliding and no one got hurt.
When you're ready. I've got this terrible glazed look in my eye. No, unless you can see it. That's what I said. Yeah, unless you can see what's I can't come alive. No, let me show you what they're doing. I'm a method singer.
For whatever reason, it was out of my control. EMI decided to drop Dusty. It's something I regretted because I knew what I wanted to do next. So I spoke to Dusty and Vicky, who was managing her at the time, and said, I've got an idea. What about an album of Dusty singing Burt Bacharach, some classics and some new songs written for her? Fabulous idea, brilliant idea. So I flew to New York, met up with Burt Bacharach, who absolutely wanted to work with Dusty Springfield. It was brilliant. So started to schedule recordings, speaking to Burt, speaking to Dusty. And very, very sadly, that was the time that Dusty had her first bout of her illness.
Looking back, I think there were signs that there was something wrong much earlier than any of us realised. There was a situation once with her hair when she had had it coloured and permed, and her hair started to break off. And I think that was the first sign that something was chemically wrong in the body. Though we didn't know it at the time, we just thought the hairdresser had made some kind of mistake. And when she went to the States to do her last album, A Very Fine Love, she started to feel very, very tired.
Every day when I look in the mirror. Dusty kept having trouble with her voice that she'd never had before. She's always had a voice that was a bit weak. If she did like 6 or 7 shows in a week, she'd probably come unstuck by the time she came to the 5th or 6th one. She'd always had a weakness there. But over there, where she was recording and she had time to stop and start, she couldn't understand why she couldn't do it. She went to see the top voice specialist over there, and he said he'd looked for cancer of the throat and she hadn't got it. But he made a promise to come back here and get completely checked over because he knew there was something wrong. And that was in '94.
That's when she really felt that something was wrong. And because she was getting ready to promote that album, she was dieting and noticed then that there was a lump.
She suddenly said to me, "Did I tell you I found a lump?" I said, "Where?" "That lump in my breast." "No." "What did the doctor say?" "Oh, I haven't seen anybody." "Dust, call your doctor." "I don't have a doctor." "Okay, hang on, get off the phone, let me call mine, let's get you." So I called, and indeed they said, you know, come in tomorrow. Pat and I went with her, Pat Rhodes and myself, and the doctor came out and said, "We're sending her to the Marsden for a further checkup." And then we all went, "Oh God, you know."
She went to see a specialist, and that's when we discovered that she had breast cancer.
She took it really, I mean, Pat and I took it much worse than she did. She was like, "Okay, let's get on with this, let's see what we have to do, and let's get it over with."
It was such a shock, but it was as if it wasn't happening to me. And I think it was only came home to me one night when I was, I saw my cat lying there, and I suddenly hit, "Who's going to look after you?" And it was the first time I thought, my God, this might kill me. It's such a terrible shock, and there are times when you're going to think it's going to get you. But there's such a great success rate and such a great recovery rate that call people, talk to them, look for support.
It was operable, she had it taken away, and for 2 years we saw, she was in remission. But then she started feeling pretty awful and went back, and that's, unfortunately, was when we discovered it had gone into the bones.
She went to Ireland with Helene, and they were, you know, they were on holiday, and she started not feeling well and having this cough, and Helene, you know, called me and said, "I just don't think it's good."
She found this lump again, and she knew she'd got cancer. She rang me and said, "It's back, Lee," you know. So that was the beginning of the end. She came back from Ireland, and that was her last journey, really.
She wouldn't let anybody tell me for a whole year that they'd come back. She just shielded me because she knew, I think she knew I'd fall apart. But when she did tell me, I did manage. Obviously I had to manage, but it was terribly hard, and I just couldn't get it through my head.
She wanted to fight it with knowledge. And I used to go on the internet and go to the American Cancer Institute and get pages and pages of stuff for her.
She was planning this whole thing for all these big miracle places in America. And I said, "Dusty, forget it. This time, this cancer is meant to take you." I said, "And you should enjoy the time you've got." And from there on, she actually did enjoy life.
There's a somebody I'm longing to see.
During that 14 months, a lot of people in show business would call on the telephone, and Dusty found it hard to take those calls. She spoke to Linda regularly, especially as Linda herself was dealing with her own cancer.
Paul and Linda were lovely to Dusty. They'd send her little presents, and her and Linda would chat on the phone. And I happened to switch the TV on one night, And the message came through that Linda had died.
It was a very big blow to Dusty because Linda was really an inspiration. And it was particularly poignant because that day flowers had arrived from Linda. Linda regularly sent beautiful bouquets. And there was a real sadness that those flowers were there.
Someone will watch over me. Quiet, please. There's a lady on stage. She may not be the latest rage, but she's singing, and she means it. That deserves a little silence. Quiet, please. There's a woman up there, and she's been honest through her songs long before your consciousness was raised. Doesn't that deserve a little praise?
The Palace wrote to Dusty before Christmas and said, we'd like to give you an OBE, and it was a lovely formal letter, but you have to let us know and you can't tell anybody. So I called Dust and said, they want to give you an OBE, and she said, that's what they give to cleaning ladies. I said, well, you know, it's not so bad. And she said, no, she said, actually, it's quite fun.
When it was clear that Dusty was not going to make it till the date when she was due to receive her OBE from the Queen, Vicky went to the offices where they keep these things.
They pulled out this huge, beautiful Fortnum & Mason bag for this tiny box, which is not that big at all. Put the box in, off I go to the Marsden. And Dust opened it and said, it's frayed, because they, you know, the ribbon is, you know. But then went, this is great, and went around the entire hospital showing everybody her OBE. Just so sweet.
Quiet, please. There's a lady on stage. Our conductor turn the final page. When it's over, we can all go home.
Dusty Springfield, one of the icons of the music industry, has died after a 5-year battle against breast cancer. Her death last night came on the day she'd been due to go to Buckingham Palace to collect an OBE.
I think I'm going back to the things I learned so well in my youth.
It was the hardest thing I did to stand and see that coffin there, because I wanted to run up and say another goodbye. And only, I thought she'd have killed me. Don't show yourself up, don't show me up. And I couldn't do it, but I found that really hard, really hard.
We were watching Bette Midler, and she sang The Wind Beneath My Wings, and Dusty said, I want you to sing that at my funeral. So I said, no, I'm not going to sing that. I'll sing By the Light of the Silvery Moon. It'll be much, much better, just to try and lighten the moment. But she actually remembered that and left instructions that I was to sing it. So I did.
I'd like to have gone to her funeral with a red nose, because it was Red Nose Day. She would have loved that. She'd have loved somebody turning up on Red Nose Day at her funeral with a red nose. I know it. She had that sort of humour.
So catch me if you can. I'm going back.
After her ashes were taken by her brother Tom and scattered at her wishes from the cliffs of Moa on the west of Ireland. It was a beautiful spot that she loved to go to. And it was also where O'Brien's castle is. And of course she was O'Brien at the beginning. And part of her ashes remain in the churchyard at St Mary's in Henley. And that's a place for fans It's almost like a pilgrimage for some, I think. And it's always covered in flowers in remembrance.
Yesterday, when I was young, the taste of life was sweet as rain upon my tongue. I teased life as if it were a foolish game, the way the evening breeze may tease a candle flame.
I think her legacy is her music. That's what she's left for us, and I bless her for it.
I always built to last on weak and shifting sand.
She brought her life to her songs, and the pain that she was going through in her life and the torments that she was going through in her life, she brought to her songs.
How the time ran away yesterday when I was young.
The greatest body of work that any singer in this country has ever left, male or female.
Pleasures lay in store for me, and so much pain my eyes refuse to see.
The best British female singer ever. I can't think of anybody better. I just think she was the best.
I never stopped to think what life was all about.
Here we are all this time on, and Dusty Springfield is still a legendary name in music.
Concerned itself with me and nothing else at all.
A hell of a good person. And a great singer. And they don't make them like that anymore. They really don't.
Too quickly die.
She was essentially a warm human being who only ever really wanted to be loved.